Hey everyone, welcome back. I am getting ready to work on my mood board project for this month. I am using a combination of the May Mixed Media Kit and the May Scrapbooking Kit. In the Mixed Media Kit, you have this Tim Holtz Assemblage clock. I love the clocks that can be altered. You have some little like screw heads from Tim Holtz. I can't remember exactly what they're called. Those Finnabair clock faces, some heavy gesso. But I just want to point out, I already have an open gesso that I use also, but it's not heavy. So I'll kind of get to that when I get into the project. You have those Prima flowers and that Finnabair mica set. In the scrapbooking kit, you get some 49 and Market flowers, these little miniature Dress My Craft frames. They're kind of pearlescent. The Tim Holtz clock faces and a Stamperia paper pack with the matching die cuts. Okay, so first things first, and I start sorting things out and deciding what I might use and what I definitely won't use. So I do take out all of the larger chipboard pieces and put them back in their little bag. I kept the flowers out because I wasn't sure, but for the most part I kept the smaller chipboard pieces out. And then I took the back off that clock so I could kind of get an idea of how I wanted to do my layout. So you can see there, I did finally find a paper I wanted, and to mark where I wanted to line up my backing, I used the clock, the main case of it, and then went in and traced my circle using the back piece so that I knew it would fit. And so in my preparation, I started cutting apart that back sheet of the paper pack. That's where all of these fussy cut pieces come from, and kind of started trying to lay out how I might want to do things based on what I was working with at the time. Okay, for my backing, I grabbed up my 3D gel because it would fill in those gaps. It would give some stability to that paper. The 3D gel works great on metal objects, so that helps secure that paper on there. Plus, it does add a moisture barrier there once it's all dry. Now this, I took it apart because I didn't want to mess up the glass when I was working on it. In the future, I don't think I will ever take one of these apart again. I had a horrible time trying to get it back together after my case was done, and it wasn't so much the feet, but the handle and the little bell caps going back on was not very easy. Okay, but I have it apart. It is what it is, and this is where I decide to go in. This is where I do open that heavy gesso because I want a nice thick coating on my inside. I wipe my outer off as I go along, just so that I don't have too much to clean up afterwards, because I wasn't sure how I was going to do the outside yet at this point. And I just go in while that gesso is still most of the way wet, and start sprinkling on and rolling around my mica powders. I do make sure to try to add some color to make the little pieces there that hold that glass front in, so everything will match when it's all put back together. I do use my heat gun a little bit on the metal pieces, but you do not want to heat up your metal pieces too much with these acrylic based paints like gesso or acrylic paints, or probably any paints, just because it will cause bubbling. Just the moisture doesn't have anywhere to go when it's trying to get away from the heat, so it makes bubbles between your non-porous surface like metal and the surface that's dry, so you kind of make little pockets, if that makes sense. So I'm just going in with my micas with that liquid color fluid medium from March's mixed media kit. I roll it around, I water it down, I add mica. I just keep layering and layering until I get kind of what I was hoping for. Alright, also don't forget, if you do use a heat gun on your metal objects, the metal gets hot. When I wanted to kind of get that inside dried a little bit, I actually didn't aim at it. I held the heat gun up over it just so it would kind of make it kind of hot in the center without the actual direct heat. It did allow me, I think, to maybe dry it a little bit more than if I had been aiming exactly at my surface. Alright. I sprayed my back with some workable fixative just so that I could paint on it. Clear gesso would work just as well. And then I made up just some mica paint using a mica powder and the liquid color fluid medium, and I added some color to the flower edge there and the berries on my backing. I dried it quickly just because it would still bubble up since that paper is sealed down against metal. So I kept my heat gun in constant motion so that I could get this second layer of my mica paint on my flowers and my on my flower petals and those little berries on here. And then because I had some of that paint left over, I just added another layer on in to my case and added some more mica, and I just kept layering up as I went along, and eventually I do get to the point later on where I use some clear antiquing wax with the micas to kind of really finish off that inside. This is my regular weight gesso. It came from a previous kit, I think somewhere in 2019. It was in a mixed media kit. I didn't want the heavy gesso on here because I was really going to be going for an aged and a distressed look. So I started with just a very, very thin base coat of black gesso on all of my metal pieces. And then I let that dry, and then I came back with a mixture that I just sort of made up on my own. Here I was trying to add a purple hue to it, So I kind of watered down that liquid color fluid medium mixed with that dark purple mica powder, but it wasn't really sticking on the way I wanted. So I do come back and decide to mix up my own layering here. So I use my regular black gesso. I use some of that liquid fluid medium, or the color fluid medium, liquid color fluid medium. I use some Liquitex matte medium, and I add the dark purple that was in this month's mica set, and the purplish pink that was in March's mica set, the Vintage Roses set that came in March's kit. And then I added that mixture to my metal pieces, and I think that worked out better than just a straight gesso for what I was envisioning, just because the addition of that color medium and that Liquitex matte medium gave it a thickness, but without really any shine, I guess, if that makes sense. Only a little bit of shine from that liquid color fluid medium, but some thickness to work with. And then if you've used Mod Podge, other matte mediums, they don't necessarily dry all the way. They kind of always feel sticky, especially if you're in a humid environment. I knew that going in, and it was really what I was hoping for, because it allowed me to just rub on a layer of mica powder on top of that surface, and then to hold that layer on, and to kind of seal it up so that I could come in and sand it. I sprayed it with some workable fixative. And then I came in with some sandpaper. I came in with my sanding block, and I just sanded back down to the original metal in some areas to really kind of give it that distressed and aged look. I tried to think about where wear marks would be: the bottom of the feet, the handle, edges of the bell, around the edges on the case, just wherever it kind of looked like it would be a good place to have some paint wore off. Now this is where I come in. I have this antiquing wax, this clear antiquing wax from Finnabair, and I was trying to figure out how to add some mica layers without really activating them the way water-based products do. So I grabbed up that wax, and I came in and I used a few different of mica powders to layer up on my surface. I use this one. This one's kind of the more pinkish rose one, if that makes sense. If you have the set, there's a couple that are of pinkish, light pinkish ones that are very close in shade, but one of them is a little bit brighter. That's the one that I used here. And then after that wax had set up some, it doesn't take very long, maybe a minute or so, I would go in and kind of rub off excess and sort of buff it up a little bit. And here, this is where I came in. I used that blue. I didn't think that blue would necessarily work very well, but thinned out in that wax, it goes really good. It makes it look, if you've seen metal that has been heated and it sort of gets a bluish and a greenish tint on it, it came out kind of looking like that because I used the blue very lightly and I mixed it with the lightest kind of ivory-ish color in that mica set. And when they mixed together, they actually kind of formed a greenish color that shows up mostly there in the underside of my bell pieces, but there are some spots also on the outer surface that kind of has a greenish hue to it. The same way I did with the previous layer of wax and micas, that pinkish, I would come in and buff it up as I went along, really get it going there, or really get it spread out there, and then I came in and just added a little bit more blue and just sort of mixed it in with what was already there. Okay, after I saw how great that wax was on the outer surface of the clock, I decided to add some wax micas to my inside. So first I just went in and I just rubbed the wax all over the inside just to give the micas some place to stick to so they wouldn't all fall out as soon as I tried to move anything. So I went in there and I just used a couple of the pinker ones and it came out really nice in there. Has a nice satin finish, has a little bit of texture in there from my other layers previously, and then came in same as before, just trying to make sure that all the parts are at least sort of matching, that are all going to be. I actually found, I used that coffee filter. I used a clean part of a coffee filter. It's nice and it's soft and it worked really good for kind of buffing the wax surface. So I did that front ring first, and I just to prepare everything, I was getting the glass put back in here. I wanted to work in stages. So after I finally got my case back together, which was more or less a nightmare, but I did finally get it back together, I decided, well, it sat over there and I thought about what it had done to me. I went to work on building up my clusters for my background. I had at first thought of maybe kind of adding some layers to that top flower, but I didn't want to. I'd gone through all the trouble of painting it and it just looked too busy to me. So I kept my cluster kind of focused there at the bottom. I didn't use any of those larger chipboard pieces. I stuck to smaller fussy cuts, smaller chipboard pieces. The small Finnabair clock face, and I cut apart that pink Prima flower vine so that I could sort of scatter a few of the pink flowers inside, and then I used the rest on the top. Alright, with the edges of those flowers just kind of distressed up with my scissors, I grabbed up my hot glue gun because, well, hot glue guns, they work good for building up. I didn't want to add a lot of wet product in here, so I used my hot glue gun to add to give the 3D effect. There we go. I wrinkled up my flowers, kind of squished them up a bit just to give them some movement, I guess. I filled in the creases with my hot glue, and then I just kind of backed them with the hot glue. And then when it came time to work on my layout, I used a piece of parchment paper so that I could put things in place and work with them without having them stuck to the back until I was sure everything was how I wanted it. So you can see there, because I'm working with flat paper and flat chipboard, I would just grab up whatever I could that was the right height for holding up my pieces. I used my palette knife there, one of those frames, anything I could get my hands on while I worked on building up my flowers with the hot glue so that they would just stay there until that hot glue set back up to hold them up. Alright, after I glued my flowers together in a couple of clusters. I don't have it completely solid because I knew I would probably come in and at least tuck one thing in, but I wasn't sure where yet. So I made sure there was space for any tuck-ins I wanted to do. And then to kind of give them a little bit more dimension, I came back with that liquid color fluid medium and that dark purple mica, and I went around the edges, or I added some highlights to some of the shadowy areas on the print. And then after that layer was dry, just to add some shine, I came in and added that lightest kind of ivory colored mica mixed with that color medium over the full surface of them. And after that was dry, then I really started focusing on how everything was going to go together here on the inside. So now I am to the final assembly of the inside. I used hot glue for those two little chipboard clocks. I came in and added some wax and that dark purple. Give it a shadowy effect. It allowed me to come in and sort of rub it around and fade it out. And then this is where I came in to really make sure everything stayed together. I used my 3D gel to hold my clusters in place. It allowed me to slide it around a little bit as I was working. And then on that smaller Finnabair clock face, I started with wax. I started with the purple. I added some of the liquid color, or the liquid fluid color medium, the liquid from March, the blue micas, just sort of trying to get it to kind of match what the outer surface of the clock looks like. And then once again, because the 3D gel is really good on metal, I used that to hold my clock face in. I used it to hold those little pink flowers down. And I used it to just sort of hold my entire inside in place. And then I came back, and this is wax and the purple mica again, just to kind of add a shadowy look in between all those layers and give some aging and distressing to all of the pieces. For the bits of chipboard that overhung the edge of that back, after I trimmed them down just to cover up that bare chipboard, even though I don't even think it would have been noticeable, I just used the purple mica with that color medium. I'm not gluing any of these down yet. I was just working out exactly how they might look. So after I kind of get them in place and know what direction that I'm going to be going with the flowers on top, I use a little bit of hot glue just to kind of make sure everything's still held together good, since I had cut them apart and I had kind of been squishing them and arranging the wires. So I do use a little bit of hot glue to just make sure things are together, and then I take them out and I spray them with some Krylon matte finish spray, just so that they are protected, since they are on the outside of the clock. I cut the that little preserving memories, or preserve memories, I think it's preserved memories, in half. I use my scissors to rough up the edges. I add some black gesso to those roughed up edges, and then after that gesso is dry, I come in and do my whole wax and mica to those chipboard pieces, the same wax and micas that I had done on the outer surface and on that Finnabair clock face that's inside. Alright, I am now to putting everything together. That little frame was just the right height to hold my chipboard pieces in place. Just that little bit from the glass, just to kind of hold them up a little bit, while that 3D gel set up on the ends, to hold them all, or well, the 3D gel set up on the ends that are in the frame, so that they will just sort of be there a little bit back from the front glass, but not necessarily attached to the cluster behind them. And then I popped my back in, stood things up, and started working on my top flower cluster using the 3D gel, using that 3D gel again, because it works so well with metal. It dries transparent, it's thick, so it holds my flowers in place while it sets up. After this gel dries, it's not dry yet, it's not dry now, it's not dry in any of my pictures, but after it's dry, I might go back, move some of the flowers that aren't glued down yet, the wires, you know, kind of arrange the petals, but only after the initial setup is done. I just used some rubbing alcohol, got my fingerprints off that glass, and except for drying, my clock is now complete. I used mostly the mixed media kit from this month and the scrapbooking kit from this month. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and give us a thumbs up. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this project and it gave you some ideas of what you can do with this month's mixed media kit, this month's scrapbooking kit, how to use your micas. I will see you again next week.